Thank you for joining us for today's Ipsos virtual roundtable discussion about shaping, designing, influencing, and delivering on social commerce. Today's roundtable guests are among the most talented executives in the industry, and you can read more about them in the slide in front of you. So now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce today's moderator, Janelle James, Senior Vice President with Ipsos UU. Janelle, you have the floor.
Thank you, Ellen, and thank you everyone for joining us today. Really excited to have this conversation with our amazing executives on our roundtable today. This year, social commerce is estimated to be a $53 billion business, and half of all social media users are anticipated to at least have one transaction on social media. So this is definitely a growing space and one that we're very excited about, particularly because social media is both a marketing touch point and a retail channel, and it works across sectors and across occasions. So with that, I would love to get started by having our wonderful panelists introduce themselves. So Catherine, you can get us started. If you could just tell us, obviously, where you work, what you do, and tell us about a recent project that highlights how you touch social commerce.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Janelle, and thanks for having me. So I'm Catherine, UX Insights and Strategy Lead across Google Commerce. I've been deeply immersed in the commerce, shopping, retail space for several years now, leading Google's foundational generative exploratory research in the retail category, including building out our foundational insights about the next generation of shoppers, Gen Z, as well as our foundational insights around social commerce. So I'm touching a lot of different things in the Google Commerce category as a whole.
Wonderful. Next up, Ava. Do you want to introduce yourself?
It's a pleasure. For sure. It's a great pleasure to be here today with the rest of the amazing panelists that we have here to talk about a topic so close to my heart, social commerce. So I come from Bywork. We are the largest live stream and short video commerce platform backed by SoftBank. We help brands of all sizes to redefine their omni-channel experiences with their end consumers across their owned and operated channels. So I lead our commerce and partnership team here at Bywork, and I came from a payment and commerce background. So being in this space, I'm super excited to see social commerce helping brands to drive the next generation of growth, because when you bring content, commerce, and community together, it really helps to expand the ecosystem we're in. So very excited to be here today.
Wonderful. Do you want to tell us about a recent project that you're touching or working on?
Yeah, social commerce actually touches many aspects of what we do. I'll give some examples of work we are doing with different industry, because social commerce doesn't just touch some of the typical industry on fashion as well as cosmetic, which are super important, but we actually have examples of our grocery customers using social commerce to build connection with their end customers. So I'll talk a bit more about that later as well.
Wonderful. Irene, you're up next.
Hi, everyone. And yes, I echo what Ava said in terms of being with a very prestigious panel here. So it's an honor to be among them. I am at Meta and run a program that is called Elevate. Elevate was created in 2018 before the pandemic to help businesses, small businesses of color, to amplify and to grow their brands online. And we do this through education programs and to provide with mentorship and also to help them get to the place where they have dedicated account support. Sometimes it can be a little bit of a maze with some of these big tech firms trying to get the support that they need. So one of the recent projects we worked on was with Sierra, and we had her nominate small businesses around the country to get sponsorships, agency support. And so we were marrying really the blend of being a creator and being a small business and helping to, as we said, to amplify everyone together.
Wonderful, thank you. And last but not least, Claire, who is joining us from Paris. She's there for Fashion Week. So we're so excited that she's in a different time zone and still chatting with us today. So go for it, Claire.
Yes, thank you, Janelle. Thank you so much for having me. And I'm very glad to be a part of this panel as well. I'm the CEO and founder of Fashion Bomb Daily. We're a media and e-commerce hybrid company that leverages our 2 million followers on Instagram to drive a multicultural shopping experience. I started Fashion Bomb Daily in 2006 as a blog, just a passion for fashion. And just by updating it every single day with celebrity style, news, street style, we've created a wonderful community. And then 3 years ago, I decided to launch an e-commerce platform, e-commerce platform called Fashion Bomb Daily Shop. And we use our large media platform to help emerging designers connect with stylists, consumers, with celebrities. And so a recent project that we recently did was actually a fashion show during New York Fashion Week. We call it the Bomb Fashion Show. And we give designers an opportunity to show at New York Fashion Week, show to over 400 people in the audience. We also live streamed it, and people could shop products from the runway immediately as soon as they hit the runway. So that was a project that I was really proud of, and I'm really excited to talk more about it today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. The first question I have for you ladies is kind of a creative one. I would love for you to come up with a nickname for yourself, but not any old nickname. I'm interested in your social commerce nickname that helps me and everyone in the audience understand what's most important, what your priorities are when you're thinking about social commerce, given your role, etc. So I'm gonna call on, let's say, Irene. Do you want to get us started with a nickname?
Yeah, so I think about a nickname for me could be Megaphone Irie, and that symbolizes my role in amplifying all of the creators and small businesses and putting that together onto the platform of social. And so my job, as I mentioned earlier, is to amplify everybody else.
Wonderful. Claire, do you want to go next? Oh,
yes, my nickname is Fearless Claire, and I adopted that nickname because I approach social media with no fear. I'm unafraid to try new things, do new things to try to drive traffic. And I also am fearless in carving out new spaces, making sure that fashion is more inclusive, and creating new opportunities for those who consider themselves to be often overlooked and sometimes undervalued.
love that. Ava, you're up next.
I love this question so much. Help us to think more on the creative side.
Yes.
So I'm thinking about Spider-Man, actually, not in the sense of jumping from one building to another. I wish I can do that, but in the sense of building a web of social connections, right? In a seamless manner across brands, across products, influencers, brand ambassadors, store associates, right? And then where data act as the interaction on the webs to help to optimize engagement as well as performance across the web.
Wonderful. Last but not least, Catherine.
All right, I'm going to step into a radical departure from Catherine here. I'm going to be ambient Annie. This is, thanks in no small part, right, to our social platforms and, the confluence of commerce and content. The fact that I am often on Instagram, the fact that we are all often scrolling our feeds and consuming, dynamic immersive content that blends with commerce means that we are always shopping, whether we tend to or not. So, I think about ambience, I think about omni, that's sort of the territory of the spirit of what I'm trying to get at with ambient Annie here. Yeah.
I love it. And I love how each of your nicknames really, touches on a different aspect of, all the things that social commerce is. There's so many ways to look at social commerce. I mean, social media platforms are both marketing touch points and retail channels. How do you define social commerce? What do you think is most compelling, Ava?
You have the best questions, you know that? So I think about social commerce as the ability to really connect with brands as well as their audience in a very immersive, engaging, and authentic way, right? And that's community-based, which can happen in social media, but also expand into the open web as well, because the nature of our interactions are social based, right? In the digital as well as the physical world. So I look at social commerce in a much broader sense on social media as well as beyond. And our goal over here at Firework is really to bring that engaging and authentic experience across different consumer touch points, and specifically on their open web experience, such as their website, their app. So there's more opportunities for the end user to discover the stories behind the brand, as well as connect with the products that resonate the most with their value. So that's the way how I look at it.
No, I love that. I'm curious, Claire, now you are not only a strategist sort of shaping how people use social commerce, but also someone who's really on the front lines in a lot of different ways. And I'm curious, when you think of the users of social media, users of social commerce today, how are they different than a year ago, 2 years ago, 3 years ago? Give me a little sense of that.
I think that the users now are different from 2 years ago or longer, is that there is a proliferation of options, which is great from a creator or a brand standpoint. There's an open market. The world is your oyster when it comes to social media. But the readers and the consumers and followers, they can choose from so many different brands. So how do you continue to distinguish yourself in this plethora of options? And how do you also continue to excel when it comes to customer service for delivering on your promise in terms of brand quality, brand identity? How do you continue to continue to raise the bar for them? Because I do think consumers are extremely discerning as well, and they're demanding, as they should be. So how do we as brands approach them and make sure that they're getting the absolute best from us that we can deliver?
Yeah, I'm hearing lots more options, more discerning, more demanding. Irene, how do you think about users and even content creators being different today than they were a couple years ago?
Well, I think there are two ways. One is in terms of a lot to what Claire just mentioned. Users now aren't just looking to the big fish in the playground and in the pond anymore. They are definitely looking for underdogs or those who have not necessarily had the awareness in the community. So I think that's the one thing that users are looking for, and definitely because it's such a fragmented market. And to Claire's point, yes, the world is your oyster. You can go anywhere. So it's so important, that engagement that Ava was speaking about, that content creators have to think, how am I going to keep one? One of the things is that we used to say at Meta is like, what's the thumb stopping experience you're going to give your user? And if you're not giving them that, and they've got 20 other places to go, what's going to make you have them stop? So we have to think about more creative ways, which I'm really impressed with how creators are actually doing that today. But I think it's about your engagement, your storytelling, and really just getting attention even more and finding the underdog, and to give everyone a little bit of more like, hey, I can aspire to be someone in this world where it typically was dominated by the big fish.
I love that. Catherine, I'm particularly curious what you think, given your background in UX. Tell me a little bit about, what you're seeing in terms of changes in the last 2 years and what users are looking for, or how they're different.
Yeah, I mean, what an extraordinary time for literally all the things. I mean, so I think so that with shifting consumer expectations and behaviors over the past few years, thanks to COVID in no small part, right? Substantial growth in e-commerce throughout COVID, economic and social instability, the increasing prominence of social justice movements in the US, like even shifting relationships and perspectives around work, right? The rise of the gig economy and the rise of the everyday entrepreneur. I think, what our fellow panelists were saying earlier about wanting to, seek out smaller, maybe less established, more creative, brands and enterprises. I mean, the lines, I was saying this a little bit, earlier in intro, the lines between creators and consumers, between content and commerce, are just increasingly blurred. And I think, throughout these last few years, there's been a greater need for trusted, authentic voices to cut through the noise, greater need to be informed and inspired all at the same time, because because of information overload, right? Like we're looking for like efficient outlets for consuming information, for creating information. And our creators and the creator economy and the social platforms that support content creation and human connection, like they have stepped in to meet those shifting user needs, I think, in remarkable ways. So I know that was probably like that was maybe a little too
perfect.
but it's such an extraordinary time that we are experiencing right now.
Yeah. You gave me a few nuggets that I want to follow up on. You talked about, people looking for information and inspiration. Where do you guys look for inspiration when you think about social commerce? And you can't talk about your own organizations, right? Claire, I'm curious. Where do you go for inspiration, or what have you seen recently that feels inspiring in this space?
Well, for me, travel, of course, is always going to be a source of inspiration, and making sure that I don't just do Fashion Week in my town, but I'm in Paris right now. We do London, we do Milan. I've been to Dakar Fashion Week, Lagos Fashion Week, and see how people do things over there, see what their priorities are. Do they use social commerce like we do? Are they ahead or are they behind? And it's actually interesting in Paris where we've seen a lot of people who are lining up lines down the block for a lot of brands, and there's another line this happened today where there's another line for people who made purchases online, and that line was empty. So people are there are some for certain brands, for certain luxury brands, where they still want to see it in person and feel it and touch it, and they'll wait in line like they're waiting for a roller coaster to go and see and feel these brands. Would that happen in New York? And what does that say about the global kind of context of fashion and commerce? It's interesting to see, but I think for me, travel remains a constant source of inspiration.
I love that. Ava, what are your thoughts?
So many places, but I would say the founders of the direct-to-consumer brands and the store associates. Those are the people who are typically behind the scene, right? You don't see them. You see more the flashing images of the amazing advertisement. But I think a lot of time, live stream as well as video content today are giving those people behind the scene a voice to come to the front of the camera, right? To really showcase, why did I develop this product? We have a customer that's a grocery store, and they do live stream where their store associates talk about the passion around the produce, right? As someone who doesn't cook, I look at that, I was like, that was so cool. I may want to pick up that, and I feel inspired, right? And I think that's the power of what social commerce is about. It's about connecting people, and it's giving people who typically sit at the back to say, oh, you go for it, and then bring them forward to say, hey, tell us why this is something you're so passionate about. And I want to better understand the value. And I think for the new generation of consumers who really want the brand's value to be aligned with theirs, helping them having those touch points to understand the stories behind the scene really make a huge difference. We have another customer called Olaplex. They do hair products, amazing hair products. And then their founder actually shoot some of the short videos to talk about their product. And I've never seen such passion in the product itself, because you're hearing from people who are directly behind it, like Claire, right? You founded the brand, who can represent it better than you do? And we have seen a great increase in the traffic as well as the conversion since the founder actually stood in front of the cameras. I think that's incredible as well. So I constantly look for inspiration from the founders and the store associates.
Yeah. Irene, any thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I think, to Ava's point, it's true when we hear from founders who, there's Rizzo's Curls, for example, if you've seen that product anywhere, but Julissa Prado the founder talks about how she started in her Tio Juan's garage down here in LA. And what you said was right earlier, Janelle, because there is such and Catherine, you mentioned this too, the lines between if you're a creator or if you're a small business owner are so crossed right now. 60% of the things that you do as a creator and as a small business owner are going to be exactly the same. And so when we think about how creators are trying to amplify themselves, they also have to have these business skills And that includes building a community. Claire built a fabulous community around her business. Yes, and it's what everyone aspires to build. And it's so key, and Ava mentioned it a little bit earlier, but not having a community can be a detriment to you. You want to build those who have the affinity for your brand and for the information and that authentic insight that you can bring and to share with everyone.
Janelle, can I answer the inspiration question too? So plus 100 to everything this amazing group of colleagues has said. I mean, the other place where, you know, I have spent the last couple of years finding a lot of inspiration is with the kids. I mean, with the next generation of consumers. I have an 18-year-old daughter, and she's a radically different kind of consumer than I am, and I am very squarely, unabashedly Gen X. But you know, this, you know, Gen Z and what's, you know, coming up behind them, Gen Alpha. You know, I am deeply inspired by this next generation. They are so savvy, and that might sound, I don't mean that in any kind of condescending way.
Yeah.
They are context and channel switching seamlessly, and they're empowered to ask for what they want, you know, to ask what they want, and demanding of brands and the creators who they look to for real authentic representation of values, and of course, like they also are. They're a fascinating generation for so many reasons, not the least of which because they, you know, they're embracing fast fashion and vintage all at the same time. But you know, one of the things that I see this next generation driving, you know, really like in an interesting new way is this confluence of values-based shopping and value, affordable sustainability, and you know, and not just environmental sustainability, social sustainability as well. So you know, a lot of inspiration in this next generation of consumer and creator, right? Because they're not just consumers; they are also creators themselves.
It's so funny you say that because, like, as you started talking, I started thinking about my 19-year-old nephew. Now, my nephew is 6'3". He's a sophomore. He's a sophomore in college. He plays basketball, so he's an athlete, like very athletic, but at the same time, really into fashion. On one hand, he's buying luxury goods. On the other hand, he got into thrifting. I'm so amazed by this. Like, it's the wild, and he got so into thrifting that he's like reselling things that he gets when he thrifts, and he's gotten his friends into it. It's the wildest thing. We went on a family vacation, and you know, every day he's getting dressed. Whatever he's wearing is like ready for, you know, social media. And the funniest thing, his mother had this like Ferragamo. So my sister had this like Ferragamo like belly bag, and he's like, "Mom, I need that." Just like puts it on, and it was like he's a confluence of so many different things where it's like there are things that might traditionally feel feminine. He doesn't care. Like it's like he's just pulling it all together so seamlessly and so authentically that it even surprises me sometimes. Like, how did this happen? So I got really excited when you were speaking because I just started thinking about this in a way that I hadn't thought about it before. So thank you.
Totally inspiring.
Something else that's kind of blew me away recently, I was on LinkedIn, and I saw, for lack of a better description, what you could call sort of a click to buy button. And it was, you know, an executive who belongs to a platform where you can easily sell consulting services, right? And I was kind of amazed. Like, you could literally book an appointment, there was a price, everything. And you know, when I thought of social commerce, I didn't necessarily think of LinkedIn. I didn't necessarily think of experts. I didn't necessarily think of consulting services. At the same time, there's like a travel blogger that I follow who is all about business class deals and started selling her services. Like, you want to find a business class deal to Europe? Like, I can talk with you. And it's not even that she's booking it for you. She's just telling you what she knows and figuring out ways to monetize like her expertise. What do you guys think about this? Like, this is literally the last 2 weeks, and it's blown my mind thinking about expertise, consulting services, social commerce. Who wants to weigh in?
It's such an interesting
I'll
question.
go for it.
You go first.
Well, I was just going to say that it's so interesting because 2 years ago, I used to hear from businesses that were service-based that they had a hard time in selling their service. They would always say platforms are great for product, but I'm not selling a product. And one of the things that we always try to say is that with a service-based business, sometimes it's easier than a product because of the ways that you can share information. Your information is your value. And that expertise from the travel blogger that you're following, that information is valuable because she has spent time as a SME, a subject matter expert, to gather these insights about where and how you should travel. So I think it's very interesting that that now more and more businesses are feeling comfortable to sell a service, and they do it with creative storytelling, which I think is, I'm glad to see this transition to service-based businesses selling more.
Ava, any thoughts?
Yeah, it's so interesting because I come from a payment background, so I always come to look for those tracks, right? In terms of like, how are people's decisions being made, right? How do people convert, right? Either is to take up a digital services or take up a physical product. I've read somewhere in a recent study that 80+% of people have been influenced to purchase or make a product, buy a digital product online after they watched a brand's video. And I think that context really matter, right? Janelle, if you think about it, you are on LinkedIn, you are looking for professional advancement. And in that context, being served a video of someone who has a lot of expertise in this space, and if the content in that context is something that's attractive, why wouldn't you have an increased likelihood of clicking on that CTA, so that call to action button, may it to be booking or doing something. And then the next stage of that is, how do you make that experience so seamless, right? So it doesn't feel like you're jumping 20 hoops across to put your credit card details in that, that you can really easily, seamlessly make that transaction happen. Because in that context, and the ability to get access to that now becomes very, very important for the new generational consumer that we talked about earlier, right? Because now really have no patience. I've seen this is interesting for me, I'm in the context, I want to get it now. And that applies to the travel influencer you talked about earlier, right? When you feel inspired in that moment, you want that seamless experience to actually have you help across the line to convert. So in my mind, is having that inspiration, the right call to action in the right context, and the frictionless checkout experience, that's what combines everything together to actually push the boundary.
Love that, love that. Another sort of piece of inspiration or stimulus that I want to talk about, there's a digital creator, I guess mixed between a fashion blogger and a travel blogger that I follow, called Calculated Opulence. And she's so interesting. Right now, she's in Greece. And before her trip, literally, I think it was in one of her stories, she was packing for her trip. And I'm embarrassed to say, I probably watched 35 minutes, like maybe more. I'm embarrassed of her packing for this trip. And as I'm watching, I'm like, why am I watching this? And on the other hand, I'm like, oh my God, this is so interesting. Like, I was literally glued to this. And it was probably, I don't know how long the actual like segment was, but it's probably about 2 hours. And she was doing everything from, you know, thinking about and talking about like literally how she physically packs things, to also, you know, what brands had sponsored her for this trip and what she would be wearing, and just travel tips. It was like a bunch of different things, but it was kind of like behind the scenes. I bring this up because I'm curious about video shopping. I'm curious about live stream. You know, what today is kind of like an infomercial, because this woman not only has like a retail shop, but she has a lot of sponsors. Like, how should we be thinking about this? You know, yeah, how should we be thinking about this? Anyone, you can dig in.
This is such a great, a great place for us to kind of park for a few seconds and focus all of our attention. Because I think, I love the scenario that you described, Janelle,
Yes.
and no shame, girl. That's what it's all about, right? And it's about the power, in no small part, it is about the power of video specifically, right?
Yeah.
Video just engages more of our senses, our innate desire for storytelling and human connection. I think so much of what we're talking about comes down to the need, the drive for human connection. And, you know, I mean, visually immersive experiences that engage multiple senses really, I mean, they simultaneously provoke a sense of wonder. They draw you in, they create a deeper emotional connection to content and the creators of that content. So, I mean, it makes perfect. I mean, and of course, you know, on the YouTube side of our Google business, you know, live stream shopping, shoppable short form video, shoppable long form video. It's all taking place because it is such a compelling way to get people closer to, you know, the trusted, authentic voices who they are looking to cut through the noise.
Yeah.
So I think I'm just riffing on sort of the, you know, what the scenario that you were describing, but
Yeah.
even on the, I'd love to, you know, I'm curious on the, like, you know, live streaming, you know, what you guys are seeing and in terms of the, you know, where live shopping is going, as, you know, the evolution of QVC, right?
Mm-hmm.
We may not be able to app after this. I think I can go on for a long time with this question because it's such a interesting, important question. I think live shopping is still at a very early stage in the US, right? And people are still testing, how does this work for my brand?
Yeah.
How do I create the right mix of the content, right? Is it educational? Is it experiential? Is it inspirational? How do I bring the right experience together to ultimately connect with my end audience? And I think the experience, Janelle, you give in terms of the unpacking or packing video is a really good one because, in our opinion, right, the most important piece to connect with the new age consumer is to have the right mix of entertainment, influence from peers of someone you trust and someone that you can connect to, right? While also driving more of a community-based experience, because while I'm sure she's doing this live stream, she'll be asking questions, right? What do you think? How do you feel about this? And what better way than that direct connection with your end audience from a brand standpoint of view? I'm sure if I were Claire running her own fashion empire, I would want to know directly, real time, right, from my end audience. What do you think about the autumn fashion trend, right? Do you think we should go for fringe, or do you think we should go for something else? I'm not a fashion person, so that was probably the wrong question for fashion. But you have that rich data and a platform that you can ultimately connect directly for your customer. I'll give an example. Actually, a very small business customer of ours, they're called Spread the Love. They do organic peanut butters. So think about this like a very, very simple concept, right? And they run live stream on their own website every weekend, 10 o'clock in the morning. I don't even eat peanut butter, but just seeing the couple together, such happy setting in their kitchen, and they're mixing the peanut butter together to do the crepes in the morning with their kids. I was watching it with my 4-year-old, and I instantly, in that moment, I bought 3 jars of peanut butter. I don't know how long it would take for us to finish it, but you feel that emotional connection. I think Catherine and Irene both touched on earlier on, because in this digital world, right, and having been trapped at home in many places for the last 2 years, people crave for that human connection. You want to be connected to friends that you feel like, hey, like they are like me. I can really speak to them. And I think
Yeah.
that's the power of video live commerce as of today, right? Because it really brings that human connection a lot closer to a brand, even that may feel out of touch in other cases.
Yeah. Claire, I would love for you to weigh in, particularly because I think one of the things that you've done masterfully for me, just even looking at you as a business person, is showing all aspects of, you know, your engagement and your interaction. I mean, from, you know, actually, I think I was watching a video from before, like earlier in the day, like the day of your fashion show. You were actually going to another fashion show, but you went to pick up flyers. Like you were doing all these things. And I was just like, oh my gosh, how
Yeah.
does she get all of this done? And still be like flawless. Like, you know, it's actually really amazing. I think there's something to be said about that behind the scenes, but not only showing yourself as like, you know, a fashion influencer, but like a business person and a real person. I don't know. I'm kind of saying a lot
Yeah.
there, but I would love to get your thoughts as well.
No, I think that, and thank you, but I think Catherine hit the nail on the head perfectly when she mentioned that readers want to connect with you, and they want that storytelling aspect, and they want to see that vulnerability. They want to see every single second. If you could have a live stream of your life every minute, that I think that's what would resonate. But for me, I share it in so many different formats, whether it's stories, reels, going live. I actually have a designer on Fashion Bomb Daily Shop who goes live every single day at the same time. And it's a QVC type format. And she says that by doing, those are the times when she sells the most, when she's interacting with her following. And so the concept of community, even if it's just a niche audience, like an organic peanut butter following, just having that consistency and making sure that you're connecting on a real level. It's not just a transactional sort of interaction, but you're actually invested in their success and their happiness, and showing how them interacting with you can help pour into that. So for me, it comes naturally, but for anybody who's looking to convert more, I would say to focus in on your reader, focus in on what he or she really wants or needs, and see how you can be of service to them.
Hey,
Love that.
Janelle,
I was going to add one thing. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Catherine.
no, you go ahead. You go ahead, because I'm going to ask a different question.
I was just going to say the benefit of video over traditional advertising, and I teach this in our trainings. We say that a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, a video is worth 1,000 pictures. And when you get to do things live, as Ava said, you really get that human connection because there's no production around it. Now, individuals like Claire who have the confidence to come on and to do her lives, that makes people feel so much more comfortable. Like, yes, I want to buy. And then when Claire or any other business wants to then add in brand partnerships, now you're including an opportunity for revenue for yourself. So there's a way that you can, and I'll use a French word, a mélange of all of these social aspects and these commercial aspects to pull together through a video, which is the benefit of why we should use video. So I always tell everyone, use video 100% of the time because it tells more than what you can say through pictures and through your content.
Love that.
Now, can I ask a quick question? I mean, and it's a question, Claire, as you were talking, it something really stood out to me. I mean, we're talking a lot about sort of the amazing benefits and sort of the magic of the tools that we have at our disposal for social commerce and ambient, omni, all of that. I guess I'm increasingly interested in thinking about, though, what creators need to create sustainable businesses for themselves, because I picture you running around and documenting everything, and you just audiences being hungry for like every second. Like, how do our creators not burn out, right? Like, creator burnout's a real thing. Like, being in front of the camera 24/7 is exhausting, right? And creating that that hamster wheel of creating content is exhausting. Anyway, it's more just an observation of, I don't think we talk enough about creator burnout in the context
of what
we're talking about today. And Claire, I'm just curious, like, how do you think about that and how do you manage that?
Definitely a team. You have to eventually have a team around you, and I'm really lucky to have a team who runs Fashion Bomb Daily social media, so that I don't really have to think about it when I'm abroad. But also, I've increasingly seen creators while in Paris bring their own teams with them. So I actually brought my photographer with me, and he was taking photo and video. And so now there's somebody else who's preoccupied with capturing my every moment, so that I don't have to think about it, or he can grab the phone and take video. And this is something, I've been doing this for 16 years. This is the first time I brought a photographer, videographer with me. But I've seen it all over in the streets of Paris, people doing all sorts of photo shoots, having their teams capture it. So, lean upon your colleagues, and I think that that's the way to do it. You can't do it on your own, and I don't think you should try to. I mean, you could try to at first, but I think that, as the weight continues to build, see if you can enlist some of your fellow colleagues to come and help you
This is not a plug for Meta and Instagram whatsoever. However, I will say that when you build communities, there's functionality with reels and stories where if you have a community, and this was one organization, Spot Sports, who couldn't be at the French Open because they had to be at the US Open. But because their community was traveling at the French Open, their Spot Sports is able to cross-post from their community the pictures they were taking. So it almost seems seamless that they were not there at the French Open. So it's about, to Claire's point, yes, bring a team, but sometimes your team doesn't even have to be people you have to hire. They can actually be your own community that want to support you in that. And another thing to Catherine's question too is, you know, I definitely agree that there are some creators, but there are some creators who are energized, so that we also run into. So they want to continually be there. They just need additional tools to make it easier for them to be online.
No, that's a great, awesome.
I recently read the following statement, and I want to know if you agree or disagree, and why not, or why not. Shopping journeys are becoming less linear and therefore less predictable or controllable. And I'll tell you guys how I'm thinking about this afterwards, but anyone agree or disagree?
I mean, entirely. Go ahead.
Can I agree half and half? Is that even an option? I do agree where the shopping journey are becoming less linear, right? People jump around, and I think Catherine talked about this earlier, right? People are going across different platforms, checking on the information, right? You see someone starting their purchase journey on social media. They got inspired, they go to Google, search for the item, go to thebrand.com, look at the review, and then they decide later on they may go into the store, right? So the purchase journey, I do agree, is less linear. And then the more on-demand nature of the content consumption means that brands need to be more aware, right, where their consumers are and meet them where they are and be very thoughtful to cater that approach, right, across their brand-owned and operated channels. May that be the brick and mortar store, may that be the online store, may that be social or advertising on the open web in different places as well. The part where I'm not sure I agree is less controllable, right? Because the argument you would make, like what I said earlier about the Spider-Man, is if you have data coming from the different sources, you would be able to support your customer to make better purchase decision, and there's more surface to shop as well, right? So ultimately the pie grow bigger versus before. Like if I think about like 50 years ago, maybe the only place you can go shopping is to the shopping mall, right? And then everything evolved over time, so there's more places to buy. We have a customer in Japan called Muji, and what they do is they do live stream after hour in their physical stores. So their store associates run the live stream, right? And then what they told me is that after they run the live stream for a period of time, they see people coming in next day in store, and they specifically go to the store associate to say, hey, I saw you last night on my computer, and can you show me the thing that you showed on the live stream again? And they actually increase their basket size, right? Because they didn't come in just to buy that one thing, and then while they're in store, they pick up other things as well. And I think that's incredible. And as a brand, right, you suddenly have more tools that you can actually help to increase your overall engagement with your end consumer, and you're no longer restricted to the hours the store opens, right? You have more touch points with the consumer. So I would say I agree on half of it, and I disagree with the second half. So although it's less linear, but there's more opportunity.
Yeah, it's totally fascinating, because as I was reading the statement, I actually went back to what Claire said about one of the Fashion Bomb Daily designers going live every day at the same time, and that being a really lucrative, busy time. Like that's predictable, right?
Yeah.
So so it's interesting. So I do see the half and half aspect to it. Any other thoughts on that one before we move on?
Plus one to everything that Ava just said. I think it's a yes, and I think from my perspective, I mean, it gets to the heart of my superhero Ambien Annie designation. I guess it's interesting because I think at the same time, even though I think shopping journeys are ambient, omni, taking place in so many different avenues. At the same time, they also are totally linear in new channels, right? The fact that I can one-click purchase, I can swipe to purchase, like that is a like a very linear, truncated moment in time where I have discovered something and I can buy it right there and then. I'm not bouncing out and moving between channels. So it's both and, I think, in my mind.
I love that. Each of your businesses gathers a ton of data, right? On consumers, customers. If you could wave a magic wand, what would you do with that data to improve social commerce, improve interactions? Give me a sense of that. Irene, do you want to start?
Yeah, so my mind was still on the last question also, as well.
If you want to add something for the last question, you can totally do that first.
Well, it actually ties into your next question, which is on insights. And I think we're actually at a time in place with the development of all of these platforms where we can get the insights we're looking for. We couldn't get them before. So it's a lot easier to understand. And it's something that we're always suggesting to individuals is do what we call A/B testing. Did you test one thing to test another? Because we want you to make smart decisions with your shopping. And for you as a small business owner, can you see what is working and what's most effective for you, right? So whatever platform or whatever format you're using to sell that. So back to your question about insights and what could we do. I think what I hear from many small businesses is that they would like one central place where they can get all of their insights though. So because we have so, to Catherine's point, the omni-channel platforms for people to get to, for social commerce to grow, it would be great if there was a tool that would just facilitate how they can make the decisions across. And there are some tools out there for sure, but a lot of times they're very nuanced for creators. And so, I see people who want to bounce between TikTok, or should I bounce between Instagram? Like where am I going to perform the best? What is best for me as a creator or as a small business owner? So I think figuring out that bridge would help them a lot.
Wonderful. Any other thoughts on what you might do with that magic wand?
I mean, I'm in it for all of us. Like, I think commerce, it's, we're talking about social commerce. I have increasingly over the last couple of years just really come to feel in my bones that all commerce is social, right? I mean, commerce is predicated on trusting human relationships and social connection. And so, more data, the more that we can, leverage, use our data, and I mean that collectively, to empower the next generation of consumers, the next generation of content creators to be more creative, for businesses to thrive, like that benefits all of us. And so I'm in it for it's an all ships rise kind of, ethos that I have in this, because commerce, it sustains our local economies, our global economies. It's such a hugely important part of, our global ecosystem. So, I know that might sound a little too hand wavy, but I really mean it.
Love it, love it. The next question I am thinking about, I want to switch gears a little bit. And one of the things I love about this conversation is not only we're talking about media, we're talking about technology, we're talking about retail, we're talking about marketing. We're all women, right? And we've been in business for, quite a bit of time. I'm curious, how, if at all, has being a woman, being a person of color, made you better in business, in doing what you do? Who wants to start? Ava, I saw you nodding your head.
And I can talk a bit more about this. I remember when I first started working. So I was born in China and grew up in London, and then moved to the US about 4 or 5 years ago, right? And I remember the first time stepping into workplace, I was that person who was so scared to speak up. I want to basically be the invisible person, right? No, that's Spider-Man. I want to be invisible, because you're not confident enough about having a voice, right? And I remember having this advice from a mentor early on, who is also a woman of color, and she actually said, there's no one else who's going to stand up for you if you don't do it yourself, right? And what's the worst thing that can happen if you raise your hand and then said what you wanted to say? Nothing is going to happen, right? And I try to like be that voice to the newer generation of the young girls today as well, because it is so important to be your biggest advocate for yourself. And I think being a woman and being someone who is often the minority in a room, that you want to make sure that you can represent your voice, but at the same time I think we're better because of that, because we don't jump into conclusion, because we're more open-minded, we respect others' opinions much more, right? We want to actually hear the voices in the room. One thing I noticed in this panel, throughout this panel, we are echoing each other. We're saying, oh, I heard that from you, that really resonated with you, because we are lifting each other up, right? And that's very rare in the broader society. And I think that's one, being a woman, often being the minority in the room, that because we know it doesn't come easy, so we take that extra step to help each other in that, and that brings unique perspective. And I think with that, I am really, really confident, even being in this room today, that I feel like, you know what, we will continue to do that, and we'll continue to pay it forward for the next generation of girls.
Yeah, love that. Any other thoughts on this?
I agree. Oops.
Yeah. So
Sorry,
many
Eva.
thoughts.
I
Claire,
know.
Irene, go.
But I could 1000% relate to your story, Eva, as being that person who used to be afraid to speak up and kind of wanted to melt into to the wall, but just always being a minority in a room, and sometimes being overlooked and undervalued, and not really wanting that same experience to be replicated for the younger generation. And so my experience really fueled my whole mission with Fashion Bomb Daily, which is to serve as a place where we highlight those who are not always highlighted or uplifted or credited for a lot of their contributions to the fashion industry. So it's my experience that has served as my mission, my raison d'etre for everything that I've done in my career, and that I'll continue to do.
I mean, you're fearless Claire. I mean,
yes.
Fearless Claire, yes.
I was going to plus one to both what Claire said and to Ava too. Is when I was younger, early in my career, felt the same way. Now I see it as we are privileged to speak up in these rooms and in these spaces, because if we lived in a male dominant world, which we still do, but if they didn't think about how our contributions to product development, to any of these things came about, they could not continue to be successful. And then being as a person of color, now we also have to talk about, hey, did you think about how these different types of cultures are using this product, as well as a different gender? So when we think about, we all have a privilege to be in these rooms, and a little bit to Ava, to your Spider-Man story, right? With great privilege comes great power, right? So we do have this power to influence greatly in these spaces that we didn't used to have.
Love that. Love that. When I asked earlier about inspiration, it's funny because Claire, you answered the question in a way that I didn't think you would, but I absolutely loved it. And so kind of doubling down on that, I'm curious, how has living overseas or traveling shaped your understanding of consumers, of business, of technology? Give me a sense of that.
I just think I'm open-minded in general to different sorts of people, different sorts of experiences. At Fashion Bomb, we always say we cover everything from the hood to haute couture. And so a lot of times in the fashion industry, it's extremely elitist. It's closed. And so I think that my experience abroad has just given me an open mind, where we're all about fashion is for everyone. We are all inclusive. Anybody who loves fashion can find a place, and can feel like they're at home and a part of our community. And so I do think that my experience abroad is the whole reason for that.
Ava, did you want to weigh in on that, given the various places you've lived and how you think about that?
Yeah, sure. I actually have a funny story to tell on that. One of my product managers is actually in Japan at the moment, actually. So we're typically US based, right? So we had recommendations from our US customer to say, we want to be more obvious in our product that this product is shoppable in the video, right? So we made the product card bigger. And she went to Japan and she said the Japanese customer didn't like it because it's too obvious. So this is something that I think coming from a global background, right? Having lived in different places, like Claire talked about, and many of us had experiences travel to different things, you start to put more appreciation for the different cultures and different customers and the type of experience they're looking for, right? And I think as uh, marketers, product owners, or executives, that we have that responsibility to actually go deep into the differences and cater to the different audience we're speaking to, right? With the product, like either from Google and Meta, you have huge ability to actually cater to the increasing diverse world, right? Of spending time to understand the differences in people. So I think that's my biggest learning, right? Coming from growing up in China and living in London, doing a global role, and then moving into the US and now still covering global role, you're really trying to double click on what does the end user want in different geographies and how can we cater to that better, right? As a company or as an individual. So you have more empathy on like what the customers are actually looking for. There isn't a one size fits all solution. So that I would say that's my biggest learning.
Love it. Last question. I'm realizing we only have about a minute left. And so I'm kind of going to make this one a combo. I would love do's or don'ts that you have when you think about social commerce, when you think about business, when you think about innovation. So what are your do's and don'ts? Who wants to start?
I'll throw out a do, and it's actually building off of Ava, what you were just saying. I mean, I think the role of research has a really significant seat at the table. Your research teams, and I don't just mean usability and evaluative research, but going deep, understanding the markets and the individuals who you are building for, and understanding that what might work in one market is just not, might not work in another market for a whole host of very subtle reasons that you're not going to really understand until you are in someone's home and living and learning alongside of them. So I just I'm thinking more about that now at like a a technology kind of product development level, less on like front line creating content, but knowing understanding who you're creating content for is the probably very similar. So the role of research is what I would plug as a do.
Wonderful. Irene, you want to go next?
I would just say continue to be an advocate for others. Part of our mission is in supporting Black and Brown creators, small businesses. How can we continue to grow them, give them the awareness that they need? So that would be one. And then the second one is, as I mentioned earlier, video. It's the most effective way to get yourself out there.
Ava, do you want to go next?
I would say do be authentic. Don't look at this reel or this viral image and decide I'm going to create after them. Be yourself, because that authentic self speaks to the audience better than anything else. And I would echo on the video element as well, of course.
Last but not least, Claire, what's your do or don't?
I second what everyone said. Do approach social commerce with authenticity and passion, and don't make it just about the transaction. Do it from a pure place of wanting to serve your consumer. And I think that is the path to success. That's been the path to success for me.
Wonderful. Ladies, this was an amazing conversation. Thank you so much for speaking with me. And thank you so much for just bringing so much perspective and insight to this topic that I think we're all thinking about, working on, working towards, and advancing. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Ellen, with that, I will pass it back to you.
Wow, I just really want to thank today's guests for their really open and candid discussion. And thank you everyone for joining us. And at any time, please reach out and connect with us directly. That now concludes today's awesome webinar. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you
Thanks,
so much.
Bye.
Bye.